This is the first video where I'm actually doing more of a deep dive into a series, and I've reviewed manga editions in the past, but in those, I feel like I don't have much time to actually talk about a series fully. But I'm excited to talk more in depth about some of my favorite series in these videos, and I'm passionate about a lot of manga, but Blom is one that I'm excited to talk about most. It has a special place in my heart and is one of my favorite manga, so I couldn't wait to highlight it on the channel. I don't know if I mentioned it before, but Tsutomu Nihei is one of my favorite mangaka, so I'll have more videos coming to the channel about his works in the future. But first I want to talk about Blom, my favorite manga of his, and I know that's probably expected, but let me explain why. First off, I want to say that Tsutomu Nihei has had such a huge impact on the manga industry, with titles like Abra, influencing series like Chainsaw Man, which we learned thanks to a special message by Tatsuki Fujimoto. But the most influential and far-reaching of his is definitely Blom, not just in the manga world but beyond. From an art standpoint, all of his manga are beautiful to read, with Manga being another standout for me in the pack thanks to panels like this one, but I'll get into that more in a later video. With that said, while I enjoy his work as a whole, Blom is still my favorite of his to this day. For a manga that doesn't have much dialogue where the main character hardly ever speaks, to keep me thoroughly engrossed in its story is a huge feat to accomplish, but Blom and Tsutomu Nihei did so with ease because what it lacks in terms of dialogue it makes up for in visuals. And by the way, this isn't to say that the story is lacking because it has no dialogue, but rather that it proved to me that an incredible story doesn't necessarily have to be told with words, and that it can be done through art instead. The story isn't necessarily given to you at all times, but instead shown, and this makes reading Blom a unique experience. That's not to say that it doesn't have dialogue along the way, because it does, but that in comparison to other manga it has quite a bit less. How is it possible, though, that something with few words can be so successful? It comes down to the emotion and the feeling you get when viewing Tsutomu Nihei's panels, and the incredible job he does with world building, and how he not only tells the story with what dialogue is there, but also how he tells the story with his art. Some might think because Blom has little narration that it lacks direction, but to me that's far from the truth. At all times, Blom has a driving narrative, which is given to us through Killy. He has set out to find the net terminal gene, and everything else that happens along the way is either to help him in his endeavor to do so, or stop him from doing so entirely. But for me, what really is impressive is that while some manga require narration to keep me interested, Blom does not. Something some people have said about Blom, though, has somewhat bothered me. While it's true that Blom leaves some things up to interpretation and allows your imagination to run wild at times, that's not necessarily 100% the case. You really can only run so far with your imagination in this story because you are given enough information to understand how this world came to be and the objectives of those within it with what dialogue is there. I'm just worried that the way some people have described it may scare some people off from reading Blom by making them think that there's no direction due to a lack of narration when there is. And by saying that it's all left up to your interpretation, because while it is up to your interpretation though, and you're not told what to believe per se, you're given the complete story every step of the way, you are given information over the course of the series which helps confirm and deny the theories you form about Blom as you read it. Where it is a completely unique experience though is how you experience the journey, how you interact with his panels, and how they make you feel. This story is unpredictable as you read it because you don't know what's going to happen next, so this too makes it entertaining to read. I also want to quickly mention that Blom is a no-filler read, so if you're someone who enjoys these types of manga, you definitely want to check this one out. While I have a lot of positive things to say about Blom, that's not to say that it isn't without flaws, because it can be confusing at times. While it may seem like it's one that you don't need to put your full attention into while reading, you will become lost if you don't give each panel and the dialogue that's there time to sink in fully. Also, sometimes when I see criticisms of Blom, it seems that some people only focus on what Blom doesn't do, like telling a story through dialogue or its vagueness, rather than recognizing it for what it does right. If you go into Blom expecting a conventional manga, you most likely won't enjoy it, but if you go in with an open mind and looking for a new experience, it will be much more enjoyable for you to read. What I also love about Blom is how it makes you view manga panels differently, maybe even make you view other manga differently as well. It's crazy to think that when reading manga, we pay attention to panels that someone has spent hours on, if not more, for mere seconds sometimes. But Blom really pushes you to pay attention to the details, to really look at your surroundings and spend that time on each panel since it places such a strong emphasis on the art. Because of this, Blom is somewhat of a quick read, but at the same time, I found it not to be as quick as some others are saying, probably because I found myself sucked into his panels time and time again. I seriously couldn't look away from them because I was in such awe. So while its smaller amounts of dialogue makes it a shorter read than most, the time you'll spend staring at and marveling at his work does add some time. Plus, as mentioned before, you could find yourself lost along the way if you rush through it. Tsutomu Nihei's art is something to behold, with a style that's unlike anyone I've ever seen before. The way he uses negative space in his art to convey something like light or an explosion, but also his use of deep blacks to convey something like a dark cavern is incredible. The architecture too is mind-blowing to witness, which makes sense given that he went to school for architecture, but still, even so, the work he creates is top-notch. Even though he is trained, his unique perspective and his style makes him stand apart. The way he builds a world and how he is able to convey it on the page really pulls you into Blom, and while viewing his panels, you not only get a sense of this world, but you feel immersed in it. The way he draws panels and how they flow is almost cinematic at times. I'm trying to think of how best to put this, but it reminds me of how the camera pans in films to show you varying shots of the same moment. You know those scenes where it's panned out on the characters walking to show the expanse of something and then zooms in on their faces? This might be a weird comparison, but it kind of reminds me of the different shots you see in the Lord of the Rings films at times, especially when it comes to the landscapes and the characters as they're journeying across them. Blom is a series that also allows you to interact with it, which is unlike anything I've ever read before, and because of that, you really feel connected to the story because you feel like you are more so of an active participant than just a spectator. At times, I almost felt like I was Killy myself on this journey, and I know that probably sounds odd, but I really felt as if I was experiencing this world because of how real it felt to me while reading it. Tsutomu Nihei doesn't have to tell you what this world looks like because he shows you through his art. Even now, I can still see the world when I close my eyes without reading Blom, and that's a real testament to how well he paints the picture. I also have to say that the way he shows depth and scale is unparalleled. You really feel like the structure that Killy is moving through is endless because at every step of the way, the locations he reaches are made to look and feel enormous as well. Whether it be a tunnel, an abyss, a cavern, a building, a bridge, etc. You get the feeling that there's no end in sight. And oddly enough, this feeling that you can't escape makes you feel claustrophobic as you're reading, even though you are in this large structure. And when it comes to the characters, he really shows scale as well, whether it be in comparison to one another or the locations in this world. It's when you see moments like these, though, that you really get a feel for how much of a master he is when it comes to perspective, whether it be Killy and Sibo hanging in the sky with a bird's eye view of what's below them, or Killy walking over a bridge. Every step of the way, the art and the way he conveys the vastness or sheer size of this world, and the perspectives he uses to show that in his art are just unbelievable and further immerse you in the story. All in all, he has a really pleasing style that's gritty but also very meticulous and refined. Because of this and more, he's one of my favorite artists. Because this story follows Killy on his journey to find the net terminal gene, much of this manga is about him making his way through this giant structure that's far larger than we can ever imagine. Of course, he comes across opposition along the way from the Safeguard and the Silicon Life, which means there are a lot of incredible fights in this series, but he also meets new allies as he makes his way as well. Blom is more so about the journey and the challenges and individuals Killy meets along the way, but various factions in this world come into play, and this makes Blom only that much more interesting. Tsutomu Nihei is a master at world building, but he's also an incredible character designer. And the character designs are something to behold. The outfits are just amazing, incredibly detailed, and really cool. I actually blame Tsutomu Nihei for getting me into techwear, by the way. The only thing I will say is that characters' portraits are rather simplistic in comparison to everything else, which some may or may not like. That aside, the characters really further hone in this futuristic cyberpunk dystopian world that we're in. Even though you don't get much backstory about these characters, if any at all, I still connected with him. Killy is a man of very few words, but this makes it more impactful when he says something. He's also a man of few emotions, so the fact that I managed to connect with him despite this is pretty amazing as well. You really feel for him and want him to succeed. Sibo and Sonicon both provide a lot of depth as well and add a lot to the story, and these two develop well over the course of the chapters. Also, the designs of the Silicon Life are as breathtaking as they are horrifying to witness. Sometimes I forget how terrifying these creatures are while reading because they are marvelous to look at, but when I stop to really look at them, they are the stuff of nightmares. Everything is subjective, but to me his brand of horror is just so effective and he's among the best of the best, and I have to mention too at times that I'm reminded of H.R. Geiger's art, the artist behind the Alien universe, when viewing his designs, which have a lot of biomechanical elements added to them. Tsutomu Nihei is a master of what he does, and there's just something truly sinister about the way the Silicon Life in particular look and the feeling you get as Killy's making his way through this dark and cold world. But there's also some blood and gore in this one as well that I really enjoy. Also, side note, the gravitational beam emitter is so cool. The Dominator from Psycho-Pass also comes in mind in terms of cool factor, but the gravitational beam emitter blasts through anything and everything, so the moments that he uses it are just awesome. Not to mention the fights are incredible. I really love that these moments just pop up out of nowhere and suddenly you're in the midst of a battle. You almost don't know what to expect next in Blom, and this really makes it exciting. There's just no one like Tsutomu Nihei, and there's no other manga like Blom, and that's partially why this series is so successful. It's unique in every way, and it's one of my favorite manga. Not just because it's different, but also because it made me feel in ways that no other manga has ever made me feel before through its art. With that said, though, it still contains elements that are similar to some of my other favorite manga, such as Gantz and Dorohedoro. Each is unique for their own reasons, with Gantz being more over the top in terms of the gore, and Dorohedoro is full of comedy and dark humor, while Blom is not. That being said, they all are fantastic sci-fi stories and their worlds have similarities, and Dorohedoro Kaiman is searching for something much like Killy is in Blom. You start out not knowing much and learn more over the course of the volumes. In Gods, there's just a similar kind of design to it in terms of the creatures, albeit more weird in the best way possible. They have a similar feel. I'd say if you enjoyed either of those and have yet to read Blom, you should give it a shot. But when it really comes down to it, nothing quite compares to Blom. While I think some people are more inclined to like Blom, I really think that everyone, no matter what you are a fan of, should check it out because it is one of the best manga out there, and as far as reading goes, is one of the most enjoyable and interesting to read. Plus, it just offers a unique reading experience that you won't experience with any other manga. The individual volumes of the series are out of print, and if you want to learn more about the out of print series, definitely check out my out of print manga guide video. But you can pick up the Blom Master Editions now, which I have a review of coming soon to the channel. They are absolutely beautiful editions, so I highly recommend picking those up if you're looking to get into the series, and I link to those in the description below in case you want to check them out. Also, there's a prequel called Noise that is available, so definitely read that too if you found yourself still confused after reading Blom, in addition to a collection of Blom short stories called Blom Gakuen and so on that I wanted to let you guys know about as well if you enjoy the series. I also always like to weave in collecting as well since I talk about that too on the channel, so wanted to mention for anyone that wasn't aware that Figurama came out with a licensed statue of Killy. He's still up on Comic Concepts for purchase. I thought I was going to immediately buy it, but have been going back and forth on this one. I'd love to own a Blom statue someday, but I really want to own a diorama piece that shows him fighting one of the Silicon Life or something. But anywho, I was curious to know what you guys think of this statue. Just wanted to mention that before I closed out because it's awesome to see Blom getting the statue treatment. I absolutely love talking about and highlighting Blom since it's one of my favorite series. I just love Blom and Tsutomu Nihei, and since he's one of my favorite mangaka, I will have a lot more videos about his manga coming to the channel in the future, so stay tuned for those. Thanks so much for watching, guys, as always, and I'll see you next week.